Greetings, human beings, and welcome to the 6th episode of Apartment 303. My name is Dave, and alongside our co-hosts Adam and Scott, I would like to thank all of you for tuning into this episode, as well as for all your support and enthusiasm as our podcast continues to grow. If you're joining us now for the first time, welcome. Apartment 303 is a new podcast where every other Wednesday we invite you to discuss and debate all things community, attempting to delve into each and every layer of the show, what makes it work, and why we love it. So, without further ado, let me reintroduce Scott and Adam. How's it going, guys? What have you been up to since the last show?
Hey, Dave. It's Adam here. I have been celebrating all of the birthdays that my family has. September's a big month for us, so happy birthday, happy second birthday to my niece, to my twin brother, to my mom, my cousin, to my aunt. There's just so many to name. And just a good month of celebrating here for our family.
I've actually been dog sitting this week. My friends left for Colorado and left me with their Australian cattle dog, the blue heeler, which works great because my dog is the red heeler. So I have fire and ice sitting in my house.
All right. The plan for today is to finish with a deep dive into episode 9 from season 2, Conspiracy Theories and Interior Design. To kick things off, however, we're going to start with a very different question, and that is, which character from another show would best fit into the study group? Adam, would you like to start things off?
Yeah, and I thought this was kind of a fun question. It just kind of came to me on a sleepless night one night. With television being what it is, there's a lot of overlap, and the nature of it is someone plays a character in this that's distinct from another character they're playing. They don't necessarily exist in the same universe. And I thought that was just kind of a fun thing to play with. What if there were some kind of crossover episode where someone who was not ordinarily in Community became part of the Greendale 7? So I thought it was a fun premise, and I've got a list of a few top folks who I think would best fit in the study group. And Scott and I have just briefly discussed, and we've got a couple similarities we know, but hopefully this does kind of give us a nice, fun discussion. And I will admit, for one of my answers, I did kind of bend the rules of sitcom characters. So
you're breaking the rules already?
Well, I wrote the rules, so I get to break it. That's how it works, right?
I suppose we'll have to let it pass.
Okay. So with that said, I want to ask, have you seen the show Barry on HBO?
No,
starring Bill Hader.
Oh, where he's a detective, right?
Yeah, he's a hitman.
Oh, okay.
So without giving too many spoilers away, that's kind of where that show goes. It's not quite a sitcom. There's definitely some strong comedic elements to it. And I thought that Henry Winkler's character, he plays Gene Cousineau, is this retired actor / director. And I thought he would actually be a really good fit for Community. There's at some point in time that he finds out some pretty devastating news. And I think hypothetically, if that could happen to where he would then join the Community cast, that would be a pretty clean break. And I think there's several fun things about him. He possesses some of the characteristics that Pierce did in terms of, having come from this accomplished line and this legacy that he has in place. He's a little bit self-absorbed, certainly. And I think that would be kind of a fun person to bring in. He could also then come in actually as a professor. And I in my mind, I thought it'd be funny if he had a beef with Professor Garrity, and they could develop these different factions of actors. One follows Garrity, one follows Mr. Cousineau, and then turn that into some kind of West Side Story-esque musical standoff. So wow. I thought that would be a fun pitch to get him introduced. Maybe a little bit limited on the ability to have him continue to come back season after season if it were to hypothetically continue. So
yeah, I'm just kind of curious how you envision pairings in terms of other characters in the Greendale 7 on like a side adventure. Obviously, we have Troy and Abed, and then Annie and Jeff get paired frequently. Do you did you see this character having any of that with your pitch?
Yeah, and that's a good question too. It depends on which character what time he comes in and which timeline he comes into.
The timelines.
So there's definitely some variability there. I think it's possible to have him pair with Jeff actually, because the original vision, I guess, was Chevy/Pierce seeing a lot of himself in Jeff. And I think this could, again, just kind of fill that father figure type thing in, again, Henry Winkler's character he's got enough baggage to where it wouldn't be like this perfect father knows best kind of fatherhood. It would be a little bit more gritty, I guess, given the past. And again, I don't want to give everything away, but
yeah, man, that's a good start. And like for me, not even having seen the show, I'm already curious to how this would roll. A new character within the show.
I don't always want to make a habit of suggesting people watch other shows in the Community. But
no.
If you have the access to Barry, it's definitely worth a watch. Who jumped to mind for you, Scott?
So this was
do you want to tell us about your process a little bit too? How you kind of came up with that?
Yeah, absolutely. This was actually a difficult exercise for me, but I'm glad you pitched it because it really made me kind of work through nuances within other sitcoms that I watch and the characters involved with them. My process really was, I started with some of the obvious, the NBC shows that Community was pitched against, the most notably Parks and Rec, The Office, and I don't have enough 30 Rock exposure to really speak to it, so I didn't get into that. And one thing that kind of stood out for me was, or something I came to realize with Community, is a lot of the main characters don't really have gimmicks like other main characters from Parks and Rec or The Office. Michael Scott has his non-PC, non-PC type sense of humor that is what captures that audience. Andy Bernard is just like outrageous, and like the other one I thought of was Chris Pratt's character in Parks and Rec,
Andy Dwyer.
Andy Dwyer, you don't even watch the show, and
Sure don't. It's okay. I'm like Rain Man.
I see your value now.
Yeah, exactly. And none of these characters I mentioned are what I would pitch for the show. That was my approach. And after looking through this lens, I came up with my first character, which is Ron Swanson.
All right, lay it on me.
Ron is a libertarian and is very, for lack of a better word, I guess, boring in terms of like how active he is within the show, but he's just very centered in what he's an old kind of curmudgeon, I guess. You might relate to him.
Quite a bit.
But I really thought he could have fit in as where Professor Buzz Hickey was at. Could have done like, and we could have rolled with Nick Offerman's, woodworking thing. He could have been a woodworking professor. And this exercise was difficult for me because I was like, well, what era of Community are we looking at here?
Right.
Are we looking at the later seasons when some of the characters are already rolling out? Or are we looking at like, peak season 2.5 to 3, like where, we have our pacing and we have the way the writers roll out these episodes. So could we have thrown any of these characters in at any point and it would have worked? Maybe not. I think Ron Swanson would be my pitch though for Professor Buzz Hickey though.
I think you make a really strong pitch there too. No offense to Hickey, but he didn't do it for me. He was only there for a season, and I think you certainly have hit on a point there in terms of the curmudgeon factor. We could have gotten that in a more palatable way through Ron Swanson. And again, I'm not super familiar with Parks and Rec, but I know enough about him to know that I can appreciate Ron Swanson.
Okay. What do you got next? Who do you have next on your plate?
So actually, it's interesting. I remembered a couple of things just as we were discussing this, talking about a crossover. And there is an obvious crossover in the Community world, which is when Abed, and I'm going to say Abed rather than Danny Pudi, actually shows up on the set of Cougar Town. And they're sitting outside Subway. Busy Phillips and the other guy, again, I'm really not familiar with Cougar Town outside of this one scene. They're talking, and Abed is very clearly prominent in the background and like nodding his head along in agreement. He's totally into it, like he's watching the episode. And then he gets up and leaves, presumably because he has soiled his trousers, as he shared with Jeff in the My Dinner with Andre homage episode.
Yeah.
So that was one. And then also the TV show Chuck. I don't know if you watched that. That was kind of going out as Community was just starting. Anyway, in one of the very last episodes, I think it was one of the last episodes, last season, Yvette Nicole Brown and Danny Pudi actually are new hires, quote unquote, to the store. And that was an interesting way to kind of plug Community. So it's not without precedent.
Mm-hmm.
To have, some kind of crossover episode for Community. I want to move on to...
Are you talking about crossovers for the Community characters into other shows?
Oh, just cross-promotion is a better word for that.
Yeah.
With Abed being in Cougar Town, that would be a full-on crossover, I would say. But it was cross-promotional to have Yvette and Danny play a small role in Chuck.
Mm-hmm.
So, with that said, I want to go into, this is the one thing I know that you and I both have in common in terms of...
The middle part of our Venn diagram?
Yeah, so I think it makes a lot of sense to talk about Arrested Development. I think there are several characters that you could argue could work on Community. The Bluth family is totally dysfunctional and has limited those poor people in so many different ways. They would fit kind of that broken person persona that plagues so many of our beloved Greendale students. And I want to submit to you my top pick, and again, kind of the logistics around how and why, and then I want to hear from you. But I think the most seamless transition from one show to the other, like if you were to pluck him out of Arrested Development and put him into Community, would be Tobias.
All right. Yep. I had that one down.
Yeah, I figured you had to, and I was watching one of the episodes today, and I thought, boy, if he actually got a divorce from Lindsay, I could see him going to Greendale, just picking up and moving and taking acting classes there. That seems really easy and obvious, and he's enough of a nut to where he could do that. And boy, the episode I was watching today was when he was shadowing the Blue Man Group, and he was like hiding in the background because he was all painted blue. Which is so funny, and again, something I could see totally happening at Greendale. That seems like it could really work. And I think too that the actor is David Cross, who actually does end up playing a character. I think it's Hickey's son, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, it is.
And
which was probably the best thing to ever come out of Buzz Hickey. That works on two levels there.
I agree. But I think if we had Tobias in the show before that, that would rid us of that episode. And that's when I felt like the D&D, the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, or Advanced, I don't remember the name of the episode. It was one of the weaker episodes in my mind. So had David Cross been on the show as Tobias, I think that could have saved us from what I felt was like a little bit of a forced episode.
Okay. So we both had Tobias. You, I think, pitched it in a better way where he would have fit the mold within the Community world. I want to tag on your pitch of like why he would have ended up at Greendale and say like, he gets a divorce from Lindsay and that maybe Funke would have actually followed him to Greendale. His daughter, and she would have been a active member of the actual study group, but she would have been using the study group to her complete advantage, very similar to the way that Jeff had started out with the group. I think, and she actually would have paired well with Jeff for some reason. I don't know why. I just kind of foresee that as a pairing, but who knows?
Okay, and it's it's interesting too. We talk about why Arrested Development could be a good fit, and we have to remember toward the end of Community's run, Kugler was a character, and that was actually played by Mitch Hurwitz, who was heavily involved, of course, with Arrested Development. So there's definitely some precedent there, and there's some reason to believe that logistically that could have happened as well as,
Yeah.
just based on character traits and things.
Do you usually have crossover between networks?
I don't know. That's probably unlikely, and it's a good question to ask. I guess I'm not as familiar with it. I feel like that was something that was commonly done in, the 90s or something like that. I feel like Kramer walked by on Mad About You one time or something crazy like that. I don't know why I would remember that. I never watched either of those shows. But again, I'm part Abed and remember those sorts of things.
Yeah, just a database of information. I have one last one, unless you want to pitch another.
I think I'm going to save mine. I think we will revisit this segment and do it again. So I've got another doozy in the chamber here. I'm going to save him for next time.
You know what, then? I will too.
Very excited today to finally get into a discussion of what is quite possibly my favorite episode throughout the entire series. And that is episode 9 from season 2, Conspiracy Theories and Interior Design. When Dean Pelton begins checking class schedules, he discovers that Jeff has listed a class that seemingly does not exist. Just when it appears that Jeff will be caught in this lie, the mysterious Professor Professorson emerges from the shadows to confirm that Jeff has in fact been taking his class at night school. Jeff later admits to Annie that he's never seen Professor Professorson in his life, and the two decide, with greatly varying degrees of enthusiasm, to find out who the professor really is. Meanwhile, while all this is happening, Abed and Troy are busy building the most elaborate blanket fort that Greendale, or possibly any community college, has ever seen.
So kind of moving on plot-wise, after we've come to understand that this has probably been constructed by the dean with Professor emerging, and Jeff admitting that he has up until this point been committing fraud, but also does not have any idea who Professor Professorson is. Do you think there's been any other collaboration besides Dean and Garrity at this point?
I think that Annie is in on it too. I think from pretty much the beginning, she's got to be in on it because
her and the dean were in on it.
Yeah, you can tell kind of by the way she reacts. I gotta go see this is the line that she uses when they go to the office supposedly occupied by Professorson. So I think Annie's in on it the entire time.
That's true, and she would love to see him get his just dessert.
His comeuppance, for sure, yeah.
His comeuppance, absolutely. All right, and after this segment, there is a Fat Neil.
This is the first reference. Yep, so after the first commercial break, when Jeff says, I don't know.
Yes.
Yeah. Then they...
Oh, yeah, because he wants to go off to lunch.
Yeah,
and there's a Fat Neil.
Well, what do you want to do about it? And again, that to me lends credence to the fact that Annie's in on it because she's trying to angle him to learn his lesson. And he says, yeah, Fat Neil's got that look in his eye. We better go to the cafeteria. And I don't remember what it was that they would be missing. So, yes, you're correct. That is
before
definitely
he
the
eats
first reference to him.
Before he eats the last lima bean.
Yeah, that's it. Sure.
I like your take on that Annie's in on it. That was not what I had initially set up, but now if you look at the following bullet point I have here, where Annie brings up the faculty directory, we could. I think based on what you've said so far, that we could at this point assume Annie and the dean are in on this. So Annie following
that faculty document that she has says, does it say Wooly? Or does it say, gosh, and he's got so many different names. Yeah, that's his Wooly rather than Professorson.
Yep. At this point, when the faculty directory is brought up, he is exposed as being Professor Wooly.
Perfect.
And one of the, this is a new joke I just caught on a rewatch. When Jeff accuses Annie of working too hard at passive aggressiveness, one of the courses that Professor Wooly teaches is active passivity.
Oh my gosh, that's brilliant!
Isn't that
so
just
great?
Absolutely brilliant. I was like, oh my, because I had to pause and do a screenshot of it. I was like, The other course was Introduction to Basics. So
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that because I had looked and stopped the screen to see just, again, the level of detail. You can't be surprised if you're still listening to our podcast at this point. You can't be surprised that so much detail is put into the diorama at the beginning of the episode, all of the different classes that they have listed out, and all of the different trivia points on all the professors there. So it's really, that's what I took away from it. But I'm so glad to hear you share active passivity. Like, that's just great.
So after Annie brings up the faculty directory, we get the phony explosive call, which is kind of a mystery. All right, my prediction is it's the dean and Jeff kind of conspiring to do this, where the dean tells Jeff he's making a faint call, because I don't think Annie would do that to her diorama.
Okay.
Other than that, I'm kind of at a loss for like what to think about that call, and doing the car explosion is going to, how it's going to drive anybody further. Do you have any thoughts on that?
The only thing I can think would be, because after that is when Jeff really commits to the pursuit of this. So I could actually see Annie, because it's to use Jeff's words, a tiny, thoroughly underwhelming message that is sent. So she could have done that knowing it wasn't actually going to damage anything. It would also be a good reason to assume that Jeff was going to try to save her. So I could see Annie being in on that, but I'm not married to that idea.
Okay. That's a good take too. Yeah, because they're
and we may be thinking about this even harder than the writers did. There's a chance that that's happening right now.
I think there's a very good chance that happens every time we do a deep dive, but
That's fair enough.
but I like the exercise, and I like to give credit where credit is due when they
Of course
actually do make these intentional things, and we catch them and find them. So after the explosive call, Professor Woolley shows up back at the school. At this point, we know that he's Professor, or think he is Professor Woolley. Again, I think this push for Professor Woolley to be there and have a presence there was still done by the dean. And I guess Annie still. After this, he exposes himself by, mentioning where this desk was a time desk. And he's exposed as Sean Garrity, the actor professor.
Yeah, he only acts to pay off for scratching the dean's car. But yeah, my takeaway, the way I observed the episode, I just got the distinct impression that this was the next day. So some of the wheeling and dealing could have taken place, if that's correct. If, Jeff says, you better make sure you've got your clothes laid out because we're going to night school. If that's the next day, at that point in time, Jeff could contact the dean and Annie could contact the dean, and then you get all those lovely crisscrosses that we see later on in the episode.
I'm glad you made that point too, because at this point, and I completely glossed over the fact that they had the chase scene through Fluffytown, and Fluffytown, it has blown up and, is overtaken pretty much like a whole part of the school. So
and I'd like to just say, in defense of the B story here, which it was relatively small in comparison, but one of my favorites, that's Community at its best to me, is when this small, benign, offhanded conversation about building a pillow fort takes place, and then by the end of the episode, it's totally overrun the entire school.
Yeah.
To the point that they have Troy knows a shortcut through the Turkish district, and he implores everyone to check out their civil rights museum. And the blankets that Leonard stole from his son are used for the Pierce's Mom Memorial Tunnel. It's just like, oh my gosh.
Oh, I did not know that last point.
Oh yeah. No, it's so great. And again, Pierce's mom had died earlier. I don't remember if it was season 1 or season 2, and they went to go get ice cream. So again, no detail is discarded.
It never is. The other thing to catch too is like Britta being involved with ends up being involved in Fluffytown, even though she was, insulting it at the beginning of the
Yeah, she
episode.
said, I'm going to go do something more grown up.
Which she technically does in Fluffy
Yeah,
Town.
exactly right. Exactly right.
Okay.
One more point about Fluffy Town and just the whole existence of that. Troy has this awesome line. He says, "Don't look at me. They had the proper permits," with respect to the Latvian Independence Parade. And again, it just shows how this totally takes over Greendale. I don't know if you know this or not, and I can't remember exactly where I read that episode aired on Latvian Independence Day, like in the real world. Latvia's Independence Day.
Shut the front door. You gotta be
Yeah.
kidding me.
Yeah. So just, again, mind blown 10 times over in this episode.
So many conspiracies. All right, so we got the setup for the conspiracy, and this is the point where I just call it the collision of everything and everyone involved with
Yeah.
Jeff trying to scam his way through community college yet again. And so we have the confrontation of Annie, Jeff, Garrity, and the dean. The first shot we get is Annie shooting Professor Woolley for cheating at night school, being the first
Yes.
one, in order to teach Jeff a lesson, which was probably the whole initial reason this thing started was
Yeah.
so, you know.
And if I can interject real quickly here, I'm
Yeah.
just going to say at the end of the first, or right before the first commercial break, when Jeff says he doesn't know who Professorson is, and then when Woolley/Garrity gets shot, at those 2 points, I remember the first time watching the episode thinking, I have no clue how they're going to resolve this. I have absolutely no idea what is going on.
I think it wasn't until like my third rewatch I was like, oh, okay, I get it.
Yeah.
I'm a little slow on the uptake. All right, so Woolley is shot. We can assume Jeff, Annie, and Garrity are in on this. And I guess the dean, right? Everyone is in on Woolley getting shot
On the first shot, yes.
on the first shot. I also want to note that after every one of these shootings, the dean's response makes me laugh every time.
I think without a doubt, Jim Rash's acting in this episode is the best acting we see throughout any episode of any season.
Damn. All right, on our other deep dives, I'm going to have to hold you to that and see if I can find.
Hey, that's okay.
All right. I agree. This was like I said, I laugh every time. Jim Rash was amazing in this episode. All right. So Annie shoots Woolley. Then the dean shoots Annie for shooting Woolley, which Dean, Annie, and Jeff were in on. And then Jeff shoots the dean to teach Annie about friendship. So I have 2 pitches that the dean and Jeff were in on it. And then I guess Jeff and Annie also had to be in on that, right? At this point.
Yes, because they have to coordinate Annie shooting Jeff.
Yep. Annie shooting Jeff for burying her like a shameful secret and also for conspiring against her. So obviously Jeff and Annie, and she goes a little off script. And at this point, we got Annie shooting Jeff. Just about everyone's dead, right? Except for Annie and the dean.
I don't think the dean is in on that because that's where you get one of his first really big reactions is when Jeff gets shot.
Yeah, and he actually starts crying. Oh, I had another really big note that I wanted to mention. Last week we had discussed Jeff as being the biggest flirt, and
Yes.
Dave had chimed in that Jeff will flirt with the dean to suit his purpose, and I think this is a good example
You're
of that in,
absolutely right.
in work. All right, anything else before we jump to the very last shooting?
Just that Woolley also has to be in on all of this because he says, okay, if I'm keeping count right, we should be done here.
Yep.
So somehow Woolley is in, Woolley/Garrity/Professorson has been in on all of this.
Right, which stands to reason that he's actually teaching a lesson on conspiracy since he's the one that is in
Oh.
on all of them.
There you go.
Right? You know, to Jeff's credit, at this point he's learned. He has had to learn something
but the
about
dean still
conspiracy.
won't give him the credit.
Yeah, poor Jeffrey. I mean, that's just the dean wanting to keep Jeffrey at Greendale as long as possible. So, all right. I might be butchering the enunciation here. Officer Kukowski
Yep, that's him.
shoots Garrity to teach a lesson about prop guns, which is the greatest lesson of all.
You know,
Go ahead.
100% of fake gun shooting accidents, the victim is the one with the fake gun. Those are words to live by.
Do we even have paintball guns? Have you ever owned a paintball gun?
Me personally, no.
No. I've never even been involved in like a paintball like get together. I feel like as fans of community, that's something we should take part in.
I feel like that could be orchestrated.
Yeah. All right. Bucket list. Also, it's COVID safe, probably, right? I mean, you got masks on.
You got to have a mask on. That's something.
Well, that's all I really had on the whole conspiracy part of the episode, which this A story was like this was like a 90-10 split almost in terms of running time. I have one, what I think is a bombshell, but I'm gonna hold off until I made sure we covered everything. It might be a bombshell. It might be something that has been caught already that you probably already know about, but
we'll go ahead with it, because I've got one other thing that I wanted to say, but I don't want to steal your thunder because you set it up pretty prominently here.
All right. End credit scene.
Okay, that's where I thought you were gonna go.
Is it? Okay. So it's funny. For the viewers, I had actually done the wrong homework last week for our deep dive, and Adam had texted me that he found a bombshell for the previous episode, and he definitely did. But I actually thought it was my reveal, the reveal I think we're about to do here for the end credit scene. Abed and Troy are doing like a Mad Lib style storyline, and this is the storyline they come up with. Once upon a time, there was a big spaceship, and aliens, and mercenaries, and war, and betrayal, and romance, and karate, and credits, and the end.
And they do that one word at a time, riffing off of each other. The joke is that Troy is the one saying "and" because he's so enthralled by Abed's storytelling, which, to your point, is
Chief Star and the Raiders of the Galaxy.
There you have it.
I mean, mind blown, man. I was just sitting there baffled. I was like, yeah, all the conspiracy theory things aside, but like this was the thing I was like, holy crap. They actually, it's a very general thing that they kind of set up, but I love that episode too. Intro to the Recycled Cinema is probably it's probably in my top 10, and just like to have that call forward, I guess, eventually to what ultimately becomes the storyline for Abed's sci-fi movie.
Yeah, and that's a great call. It doesn't come back until that's episode 6. Excuse me, season 6, correct?
Season 6, episode 8.
Yeah, there you go. So that's, again, just an incredible example. No detail is left behind in Community. The other detail that I wanted to mention was, again, related to Officer Kakowski. In a couple episodes later, in season 3, the foosball episode, Officer Kakowski is dealing with the misplaced / broken Batman Blu-ray. He turns to Annie, like as he's getting ready to leave Troy, Abed, and Annie's apartment, and he says, "Did I ever pretend to shoot a guy in front of you to teach you about gun safety?" Which is great, because like obviously he does, but it's just so funny that someone would have that recollection. Like as the observer of the show, of course we remember it. But
right.
If he's a real character, like he's a real cop doing real things, and like he would only have a foggy memory of that. And it's just so funny to kind of put that out there that way.
Yeah, I did not know about the call forwards, call back.
Yeah.
Whatever. Yeah, this was a fun episode. That's really all I had for my notes on this, and I'm sure we've probably missed something because this
of course, it's such a deep episode that we definitely. Oh, I found one other thing now that I think about it. And I wrote down the time. It's like 9 minutes and 58 seconds into the episode. You see one of the signs just, in the hallway saying, "Oh, what's this way? Cafeteria is this way." There is a reference to Borchert Hall. And it says Borchert Hall this way, which season 5 ends with Samuel Borchert, who made his millions, or was one of the founders of the institution.
Oh.
And his computer was all made of gold, and it eventually came back to save Greendale.
What? Oh, man.
So
that's another good one. Damn.
So
Damn.
and it just goes to show with Community, it's not a show, you won't get the most enjoyment out of it if you've got it on in the background, if you're multitasking, if you're doing something else. And there's plenty of shows that are good for that.
Yeah.
In Community, once you've seen it and like really paid a bunch of attention to it, you can definitely do that. But I've been watching this show for 10 years, and I still find new things like this every episode we do.
Can you even put it on as background noise anymore? Because I find myself getting pulled in.
Oh, absolutely. It's work, but it's definitely a labor of love at this point. It's just so rewarding. No matter what episode, no matter what part of it, you just get hooked in to your exact point.
All right, let's leave it there for today. We would like to take this time to thank each and every one of you for tuning in and invite you to join us in our next episode, where we will be discussing actual current events regarding the show and its participants, as well as which classes and professors we would elect to take were we students at Greendale. Apartment 303 is now available on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you have any suggestions or are interested in collaborating, our email address is apt303pod@gmail.com. For Adam and Scott, this is Dave signing off. We will see you in episode 7.